of the DJ community. It's been a few months since our last podcast and recording, but Dan and I are delighted to be back. And I think this is the first one that we have done in person. Tonight we are joined by Richard Sackey-Addo, my colleague at the International Tennis Integrity Agency. And Richard has worked in the education team at the ITIA since 2018, and prior to this has worked in the International Tennis Federation Development Department. Rich has 10 years experience working across various aspects of tennis, including integrity, coaching, coach education and tennis development. Really looking forward to this chat tonight to discuss another part of the sporting world, chat about Richard's career and our usual building relationships, routine related questions. For those listening live, please feel free to ask questions in the comments box and we will answer them during the recording. But it is being, as I said, recorded, so it will be put on our podcasts as well for those that are listening later. So to begin, Rich, welcome.
Hi.
And thank you for coming on.
I feel like we're doing interviewing things.
I know. Welcome, hello.
See 7-5 years.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. And we'll just dive right in. So yeah, how did you become involved in tennis?
I'll be careful because I'm aware we've only got an hour, so I'll keep this one as brief as I can. Basically, I've been involved in tennis pretty much my whole life, right from, as I'm told reliably by my family and my sisters, since I was sort of 2-3 years old, started playing tennis. Funnily enough, it's a sport whilst I'm working in it professionally today, I actually didn't like. I kind of came into it by accident. I was a little kid that wanted to play football really badly, but at the time, when I was 2-3 years old, there was no like soccer tops or anything like that for really little kids. So they said, sorry, it's too small, you can't go into tennis. You can't play football, sorry, maybe try tennis over there, see if he likes it. And I was that kid on the tennis court, and my family were like, you were horrible, like you just didn't want to do anything, you didn't want to play. But I was lucky enough to have a really good coach who sort of really encouraged me and got me into it. And I kind of realised like I could hit a ball all right. And yeah, just began to enjoy it and played ever since then. When I was 16 or 15, I did my level 1 ITIA coaching qualification and realised, wow, I really like coaching. I really love teaching people about the sport and understanding more about getting people into the game. So I started doing my coaching from then. And then when I got to uni level, started working in the development of the game at my university in Bedfordshire and in the local community as well. And then from then I've gone on to the international stage in my full-time career over the last few years. So that's a whistle-stop tour through me and tennis, really.
And as you know, in your role at the ITIA, it would be good to hear about. Well, I know because I work with you, but for our listeners and viewers, talk about that role itself, and I might go back.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I work in the education team at the ITIA. So basically, we're responsible for an education program that informs, educates, and protects everyone, covered by anti-corruption and anti-doping rules. Sort of making them aware of the rules they have to follow and the values, the right integrity values of tennis. It's a great team. It's a small team of us, but we're a really small, mighty team who've been doing what we've been doing for the last 5 years or so. And yeah, it's really great. It's another way for me to stay involved in a sport that I love. It's an area of tennis I never thought I'd get into. I think for a lot of people, integrity is still quite a new aspect of tennis. We all know about things like anti-doping and anti-corruption things, but a lot of people don't see it as, how did you get into that and things like that. Me and you, Jodie, have very different routes and how we've got to where we are, working as colleagues in the same organisation now. But yeah, I love going out and being on the ground and speaking to players and coaches and officials and different people in the sport. I'm very much a people person, so it's really great to be able to play a small part in helping young players particularly make the right decisions later on in their future and do things that, if anything bad does come up, approach, or they're faced with a tough decision, it's really cool to think that what myself and our team, what we've told them, what information we've given them is been able to help them make the right decision at the right time. So it's a really great role for that, and also to work with our legal team and intelligence specialists and investigators. There's so much different experience and and skills in our organisation. So I feel like you're always learning. No day is the same. Of course, it's challenging working in an international sport. Every sport has its various challenges, but yeah, it's exciting. And as I say, it's really great for me to feel like I can give back to a sport which I really love. First and foremost, I'm a tennis fan. So it's really cool to be involved in that aspect. But then, as I say, playing a small part in the prevention of sort of corruption and doping.
I wonder if I can ask a question, Rich, which is as a lawyer that works a lot in football, for example, I'm always really interested in speaking to people who have more or less grown up in a particular sport. It sounds like you with tennis, me with football to a degree from back in the day in Liverpool with myself, and then more recently in London. And I definitely went through a phase at some point of not necessarily falling out of love with football, but because it's your day-to-day, because it's the thing that I was constantly thinking about, was constantly involved in, the strains and stresses of that everyday life. And in a way, when you're growing up, the leisure pursuit that you have then turns into the thing you want to try and convert into a job or a side hustle or passion or whatever else it might be. But then when you're doing the thing that you're doing, the thing that was your pastime, that was almost your pressure valve release, the thing that was your leisure time, then becomes a bit all-encompassing. I know it sounds almost a bit strange for, when lots of people are listening into this saying, oh, I'd kill to work in tennis or love to work in football. But how is that, how is your relationship with tennis developed from obviously a very young age to the position you're in now?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think it can be definitely hard at times, I think, as you say, to kind of switch off and that thing that is your release to go and have a kick about with mates or to go and have a hit with someone on the tennis court. But, if that's after doing a full job, a full day working in that sport, sometimes it can be very hard. As I said, I'm first and foremost like a massive fan of tennis, of other sports as well, particularly football. But I still regularly play tennis at a club on a weekly basis and compete at club level.
Is he any good? Have you seen him play?
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Oh. I was going to say that I'm going to play, but I'm definitely not playing.
So I think right in, I'll beat you.
Get questions and results.
Yeah, exactly. Results. But it's really, of course, there are times when it's just like, I don't want to watch what's happening on the tour at the moment. I'm not interested, or I might take my eye off the ball with what's happening at the slam, for example. But then at the same time, that kind of pales in comparison to those times where sometimes you just kind of take stock and like, wow, like this is as close to the dream job as I could have ever wanted, particularly when I was a student. Like, I'd love to work on the tour and be around all these players and people I look up to, and I love to follow what they're doing. Now, sort of, I'm very much in that world. So I think that outweighs the times where it's just like, I'm not interested in tennis, I don't want to watch it today. So you kind of, I try and do a good job of being grateful for that and enjoying it and being in the here and now and remembering, I really do love what I'm doing and being a part of it. And it's a position, of course, a lot of people would love to be in, working in a sport that they truly love.
I think that question back to you then, comparison with football.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you? Well, the truth is, for a while, I actually didn't consume as much football or talk about as much, and started doing triathlons instead for a few summers. But I think you just got to let it unwind. Really, is the truth, and work out what works best. Because again, I always think the comparison to other people is a difficult thing to rationalize yourself. We are all comparison or comparison engines. We're always saying, what would the other person feel about the job? How are they doing? What's their external projection of whatever it is or otherwise? And it helps in a very short term saying, oh, everyone else would kill to have my job, so get over yourself and get on with it. But the truth is, you actually need to find slightly better perspective inwardly to be able to actually work through why you're feeling the way you're feeling and how you're doing certain things. But I think ultimately then I realized, it was the thing that I enjoyed doing so much because I'd spent so much time thinking about getting into the industry and then building a network. We're going to talk about developing relationships, feeling your flow when you get into certain states where you're like, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing or how I'm going about it, or all the fantastic perks that come with the industries that we're in. But I think it's also really important to assess that you've got to be quite realistic about it when people want to get into these type of industries, that it is quite all encompassing, all consuming. But generally it tends to be worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I would agree definitely with that.
I think it's important as well to have kind of different pursuits and different interests as well. Like I said, whilst I still play and compete in tennis outside of work, but I'll still love watching football and following Chelsea. I heard you're a Liverpool fan, so I had to get that.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
But yeah, just having other things as well that I can use to kind of switch off from what is the day job and something else that I really enjoy. Otherwise, it just kind of it would take over if you kind of only have that one. I feel anyway.
I'm going to then just ask one thing, Jodie, if that's okay, before then you go on, and it sort of leads in, which is, one of the things that Jodie and I talk about a lot to some of the people we're lucky enough to speak with for the community is, it's easy to have that passion, that love for the sport, but the difficulty sometimes, and Jodie was talking about this at length, is making sure you have the underlying skill set or the skill set to grow in order for you to do the job well enough more than anything else. So I think the thing I'd be really interested to hear your views on as well is, how did you go about from the position of loving tennis, playing tennis, doing your qualifications and everything else that followed, to then realizing what you actually needed to do from a skills perspective or a transferable skills perspective to make that jump from just the thing that's your leisure time to the thing that then makes you useful, valuable, and of value to a sport and the wider team, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's one thing to be a fan and have lots of knowledge and understanding of the sport, but then just me liking the sport and sort of knowing how things work, that doesn't always necessarily help. That's not help me impart information onto players, staff, officials, what have you, across the sport. So it's really important that you kind of don't get sucked into that, and you still work on building yourself as an individual, your skills base as well, and developing where you need improvement as well. Because you can't just rely on being a fan of the sport, and sometimes that can be, I feel almost like it's a little bit of a negative, because it's very easy to get sucked into just having that kind of fan perspective, or just because I like certain areas of the sport, or I like certain players or tournaments, whatever, but you can't let that cloud your judgment. So it's really, it's kind of taught me how to divide, some of my personal feelings for the sport and opinions, and take those to one side and think logically, think about the organisation, what we're about, think professionally as well, and then also to work on my communication skills, and not, it would be really inappropriate of me to talk to some of the people that I'm fortunate to have to speak to if I was to talk to them like a crazy fan, or like they're a fan. That's absolutely not the case. So I've had to really learn how to be professional in my approach, and people that I'm speaking with, and how to build relationships from a very professional standpoint as well.
And to get then going on from your answer and to get involved, I guess, with the first role of the ITIA, is that the first role was? So then from just being tennis fan, playing at clubs, then doing your level 1 at the LTA, did that then present you with the opportunity to then join the ITIA? What did you do to get from that position to the ITIA?
Yeah, so I did my level 1 and level 2 coaching qualifications. Did my level 2 whilst I was at university. We're quite lucky that for certain people doing certain levels of coaching qualifications, they kind of helped encourage people to do that by supporting them get onto those courses, which was great. From then, I think one of the main factors for me getting into the international stage of the sport, I kind of credit a lot of that to a program that the LTA runs for university tennis, which is the University Tennis Coordinator Program. So essentially what that is for me is it's a fantastic program. It's, in my opinion, is sport leading, at least in the UK. It gives university students, postgraduate students, the experience of being responsible for developing tennis at their university and within their university's local community. So it's essentially, and you're supported with your studies as well. So you study part-time, or in my case, I study full-time for my master's, whilst having the responsibility of doing that. So you're developing all areas of tennis, you're getting more rackets in hands of people, you're getting staff involved, you're developing sessions for recreational players, developing the teams, you're engaging with your local tennis clubs, local schools, colleges, getting people from my university. There was a lot of people on primary education courses, so getting teachers ways to get into tennis and that they can deliver it when they're at schools and things like that. So that for me, it's a program that's fantastic because it's essentially for someone who is at that level, still a student, but it doesn't even feel like an entry-level job. It gives you a lot of responsibility and a lot of really understanding how sport runs at that level, even within your county regional area. And that was a big part of developing my communication skills and my people skills, because you have to be able to liaise with your university, with people. You know, you're there. I made a big push to try and develop a student workforce, empower people, but you know, it's not me to deliver everything. I want you to be able to deliver these courses. I want you to have a chance to, you know, when you're going for jobs in the future, you've got some experience leading tennis activities on your CV and that experience as well. So that really helped to meet other university tennis coordinators from around the country as well, each with different size kind of tennis clubs they're running. Some of the high level tennis clubs in this country, you know, they're bigger than most normal clubs. They're, you know, hundreds of members of students and staff. And whereas, you know, our university was quite small and not a sort of traditional tennis background. So you're learning so many different things from different people, different circumstances from around the country. And then also meeting people with the governing body, meeting people in the wider sporting landscape. And then a lot of those skills that I built up then gave me the confidence that actually I'm doing quite a good job here, or being told that I'm doing quite a good job, and results are showing that I'm quite good at this. And it's, you know, and I'm learning a lot, and I really enjoy this. I really enjoy being a part of the sport from behind the scenes and you know, helping improve it and giving back, as it were. So a lot of those skills and those opportunities that then presented the opportunity for when I was finishing my masters to get a job with the ITIA, which was amazing experience, which was great to spend 2.5 years there. I was fortunate to be based in Valencia in Spain for that for a couple of years, which was again another fantastic experience, which led to more opportunities to develop myself, to develop relationships around the sport, and lots of those that I developed relationships and things that I learned about the sport from my time as a university tennis coordinator and from my first role at the ITF. Lots of those relationships I still have now, and that helps me in my day-to-day job, and that helps me with confidence delivering sessions. That helps me with understanding little things about the sport that other people might not necessarily know as well.
That's so interesting. Like,
how's the clay court?
not my favourite surface, but I do miss it.
the grass hardcore there.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask then, in terms of one of the things I know Joe's going to touch on, but we can, maybe I can a little bit as well. Apologies if we're going to go in slightly different order, which is, you know, so you built the sort of foundations of organisation in sport and in tennis particularly. You get on the course, you've got that first job, you're beginning to build your competency in a range of different skills. Alongside that, obviously, you've got to be able to get on well with people. You've got to be able to start understanding motivation, understanding how different people react in particular circumstances, and then sort of develop those relationships to build that network. Did you have any conscious or unconscious techniques or things that you were thinking about when you were just starting out, and how to go about either, you know, growing as a person, understanding and building networks to better help yourself and others? Did you have anything in mind at those initial stages, or things that you just iterated as you went?
Yeah, I'd say first and foremost, just to be an absolute sponge for some of the people, whoever it is that you're around, who's more experienced than you, who knows more than you. You know, you don't ever go into a room thinking you're the smartest person in the room. You know the most in the room. Just always be able to be a sponge. I'm quite fortunate. My secondary school I went to was, you know, very mixed people from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life. So that really was for me like a school of life, and really I think set a lot of those early foundations for people skills and being able to talk to people from different parts of, from different walks of life. And trying to understand different people. So that was really, really useful for me. But then also remembering we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so listen. Really, really important, the listening skills. Of course, we can always improve on that, but be prepared to listen to others, and to always, as I say, soak up information, and to remember things that people are telling you. And then, yeah, those are some of the really, really key things for me.
I'm going to talk about listening for a second. No, you go.
Absolutely. No, on you go.
Oh, sorry, and also remembering to try and, when building relationships, try and leave an impression, you know, whether that is
good or bad.
Try and make a good one, don't make an idiot out of yourself, but just to also, you know, try and have a way that someone can remember me, or that someone, yeah, exactly, whether it's, oh, you know, can we have a follow-up contact, as you said sort of before we came on today, a way for people to be able to engage and to keep that conversation going, keep building that relationship, not just have a cold, as you say, anyone can meet at a conference and then never talk to each other again, but actually, oh, can we have a chat, just, you know, if you have half an hour free, or let's have a coffee and learn a bit more about what you do in a bit more detail. I think very much what I've learned is it, and particularly when you're around athletes, for example, they love people that have the interest to learn about them, very much like to learn about other people as well.
Yeah.
That's where sort of the listening comes in, and the leaving an impression as well, so that someone also feels that actually what they were saying was quite good, or I think they're quite knowledgeable or useful or a good person to come to. I'm also going to go back to them for things as well.
And that's a really good point, and that's something that I certainly did when I was trying to build relationships at the sports kind of conferences I went to before I joined the ITIA. It was very much a case of like, what can I do, who can I speak to, and I don't think that's the case anymore, but at the time when I was attending conferences, it was very male dominated. So as a female going into these events, and you could give somebody, you know, your contact details or your LinkedIn or whatever else, they're more, I found as a positive in when I was looking, because they were more likely to remember who I was, because I was in the minority. And whilst that, you know, that's frustrating at the time, I know it's changing in the sports sphere, which is amazing. I found that as a positive to do so. So I was fortunate to have a number of follow-ups from meeting at conferences and whatnot. And they were likely to remember who I was because of being a female. And that it shouldn't be the case. Of course it shouldn't be the case. But I mean, it can apply to anyone. Of course it can. But you're right. I think leaving an impression, or just something interesting fact. And we've talked about that a number of times. Like, rather than just talking about, you know, the standard questions that you'd ask somebody, just get to know a bit more about them as well. And if you mentioned 3 questions you'd ask about, you know, what are they interested in, or certain things like that as well. And yeah, I think it's daunting to go up in any conference or to meet anyone. I found that pretty difficult. I don't know either of you do, but I don't like doing that. And I really had to make an effort to do it, because otherwise, if I didn't do anything, I wasn't going to get anything out of the conference other than the conference itself. But you also go to these events trying to get more than just the you know, to meet people and network. So you've got to go out of comfort zone, and it's not going to go great all the time, and you're not going to maintain contact with everyone that you meet. And that's not even the point of it. If you speak to 10, 20 people and you still keep in touch with 1 or 2, and that's built over time, then that's, you know, that's a success in my view.
Did you find that quite daunting at times to, like, oh, okay, I'm going to go and speak to this person, they're actually quite senior, they're not going to want to talk to me or listen to me or be interested in mine. So I think that's just something, maybe a societal thing, that we kind of, you get to a certain stage, those questions and those doubts come to your mind. It shouldn't be the case. As you said, you just need to go for it and, you know, shoot your shot, see what comes up.
It shouldn't be. And at a number of the conferences I attended, you'd often get like a list of attendees. So you could, or what I would do is I would like read the biographies of all of them. So when you saw somebody, you'd be like, oh, there's X, and then you'd know a bit about them. So you can go up and explain, oh, I've read this article that you did, or I read that, and then that almost makes them engaged that you're talking to them for a purpose, for a reason. Yeah. But yeah, because a lot of these conferences, before I knew anybody really in the industry, I went on my own, rocked up on my own, not knowing anybody. So having to go in and just join groups of conversation was incredibly daunting. But I thought, if I don't do something here, you know, I've spent a bit of money to come here, I need to make the most out of this. Incredibly daunting. But the more often you do it, I think the easier it becomes. It just becomes a bit more natural if you've been in the environment before. But if you've never been in the environment before and you go into a conference, it's just full of, you often go in, and I think this is what advice Dan always gave me, is like go to the coffee table first, like grab a coffee or a juice or whatever else, and then just try and integrate into a conversation. But even that in itself is really difficult and really hard to do. But yeah, I think as I've been to more conferences, it's easier to do. Because if you know one person, then you can kind of tag on with them at times as well, if you introduce you to whatever. So yeah, it's an art in itself, I think. Yeah. So I'm still learning very much.
Yeah, it takes time. It's a skill. It takes, like I say, every time it's not going to be successful, but those times it is. You could have someone that is a good relationship, work, or even becomes a friend over the next how many years, which is ultimately what you want. And I think that's particularly key for students. I've done a few kind of presentations and type things for students from my old university, and one of the main things to say is, look, we're told as students, okay, you need to set yourself apart. Everyone's doing this, that, and the other into their CV, but things that are really going to set you apart, and I believe things that I tried to do was going to industry events, and even if I'm the only one, and people are like, why are you going to that? Why are you spending your Saturday doing that? It's like, well, one, I'm taking an interest in thinking about sort of my future, and I might meet a few interesting people that can give me some good guidance, or who knows, one day I might be able to offer something to them that will be useful, and we can build a relationship from there. So I completely agree with you. Like, it is daunting, it's not easy, and it's an art, and it takes time. But there's nothing wrong with trying it. I
totally agree. I think for me as well, even looking to speak to senior people, I think at the first couple of conferences I went to, I would never do it. I thought, I'm just like, a graduate.
You'd never go and speak to someone.
No.
Or you would never go to the conference.
No, I would never go to. So I would go to the conference, but then I almost felt like I had a reason to be there. And sometimes I think it was definitely imposter syndrome. Then I'm entering this sphere with all these, really experienced lawyers or people experts in their industry, and I'm absolutely not. So I have nothing to say. I can't add anything to this conversation, really, other than can you give me a bit of advice, or what are your tips, or all those kind of things. I felt like I had nothing to say, but actually,
telling yourself
exactly, and by being there, of course, but why they made conversation after why are you here, and you can talk about obviously your journey up until that point. But for me in my head, it was very much a case of I don't have anything to say. And
conversely, though, if you, Dan, let's say kind of how you and Jodie kind of first met a few years ago, that was her approaching you. Wasn't there an element of, oh, this is great, she's taken the courage to sort of write to me and approach me, and so you almost kind of have instantly more respect for someone doing that?
Well, all of the above. I think what I was trying to do, and we continue to do, and I know you do, and Jodie, you do as well, is I remember when I was exactly in everyone else's position as a student looking to try and make their way in the industry they wanted to work in. And there were just 3 or 4 people that went really out of their way to help. And it made a disproportionate difference. I think that's the thing. So there's a great film called Pay It Forward, which is all about, helping others, and then others will help others and others. Not for the sake of anything else apart from it's the right thing to do if you can, and if you have that time to be able to do it. It's one of the reasons why we do this sometimes. But I remember if you mix a bit of proactivity with creativity, and you're willing to put yourself out there, it's massive. There's a phrase that I've definitely plagiarized from somebody else, which is, you can't see beyond the opportunity that hasn't arisen.
Let's go with that.
I know, I feel like it's from the Matrix or something, actually. But it's almost like what you were talking about when going to conferences on Saturday. You might meet someone that's of interest, or you might do something. I'm almost like, nothing is ever, A equals B or leads to B. Sometimes A leads to the whole alphabet, but you just don't know it yet. And so the thing that I always love to think about is, you never know what can happen. You definitely know what will happen if you don't do the thing, but you've got no idea, usually in a positive way, what might happen, what might flourish, what might occur as a result. And so I'm going to ask Jodie if you can tell the story of LinkedIn from yesterday or today, because I think it's just a nice reminder of a bit of your story, actually.
Yeah, so Dan had just shared the link for this call tonight. in instant message on LinkedIn, and when I looked back up to it, it was like 3 or 4 years ago when I'd
even longer, I think.
Maybe 5.
You
I
said
think it was
it was
5.
2017,
17, so maybe 5 years ago, and it was at the time when I was looking to get into the industry or help or advice to get in, and I think the message went along the lines of, "Hi Dan, like I'm a newly qualified or solicitor and trying to get into the sports sector. Can you know give some time or give some tips or whatnot?"
What did I say?
I don't think you replied.
So you got ghosted straight
You
away.
definitely never replied. So I thought, well, I'm not going to go to my email. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. That before we came on the call.
We definitely got in touch.
So no, you did. So the reason my dad and I got in touch is I read one of his articles, I think, on law and sport at the time, and I just reached out via email. And we got in communications.
Well, that's good persistence, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is, and that is what it is. I think persistence, perseverance, patience, all these, and positivity as well.
Good.
Like they all.
Sounds the title of the book.
it all pays off. Yeah, and Dan and I have been in contact, you know, well, ever since really, like 2017. But if I hadn't ever emailed, we obviously wouldn't be in touch because you have no reason to ever reach out to me at all. But it's because of my interest in the area, and I thought, like, just through digging and researching a lot of other things that a lot of other people do, and it just so happened Dan replied, and that's how the story kind of went. But yeah, it's
I think that instantly sets you apart of people who kind of have that persistence and that perseverance. It's okay, they didn't reply to my LinkedIn message, right, I'm going to send them an email instead, right? I'm not replying to an email, okay, we're going to go to the coffee table and talk to them at that conference. And that sets you apart. You could be the most outgoing person who makes a great first impression at an industry event or something at face value, but then you never speak to anyone again. Yes, okay, you may be memorable, but there's shown no interest in kind of building that relationship from there. But if you're that person who is like constantly, you know, you're there, you want to engage, you want to develop a relationship and grow and have some back and forth, I feel like you're going to remember that person.
And that point that you just made, that wanting to be there, that is it. If you want to be there, you're likely to A, enjoy it, but B, want to actually meet people. If you're there because you've got no interest in it, or you're just there because you are, like, I feel you're not going to get too much out of it. I feel if you want to do things, do them. If you don't want to do them, don't do them. And I really think it's as straightforward as that.
I also think, again, it's one thing, Jodie, we've talked about, which I'd be interested in your views on, is getting out of your comfort zone, which is a really awkward place. The uncomfort zone is a very difficult place, an awkward place, and the comfort zone is a very comfortable place. To the extent then that, you know, someone said to me a while back is you should judge yourself by the amount of uncomfortable positions you put yourself in. You know, and it's a difficult thing to sort of say, isn't it, really? Because you never want to do the thing that you don't want to do. But a lot of the time, it's sometimes confronting that perspective and then still doing it nonetheless. How have you gone about in different ways, I guess, putting yourself out there to do the thing that might not be the easiest thing that you want to do, but still doing it nonetheless?
Yeah, it's never easy to put yourself into something unfamiliar.
Like public speaking, I was going to just say, for example, maybe looking in, if I could say, because, you know, you're very, again, sorry for interrupting, but you can see you've had a lot of practice at public speaking. It doesn't come naturally to very many people, myself included, even though I hog the conversation, apologies.
Not so.
But the really interesting thing I love, definitely when I speak to people, and I've watched lots of TED Talks, and you hear people speak on podcasts, is they're extremely deliberate about what they're saying, and that takes an awful lot of practice. I can see that you've put the hours in, so I don't know, maybe that might be a sort of adjunct.
Yeah, it's just all sort of practice and experience and getting more and more comfortable. Being uncomfortable, that's a phrase we hear more and more now than ever, but it really is, I believe it really is true. I find you can kind of stay in your lane and be comfortable, or you can really take a risk, and you never know, that might be a really great thing over there that you've never done before, you've never experienced. You might learn a ton of new stuff, you might not learn anything, but you're never going to know if you take that initial risk, that initial jump. And just, yeah, I feel there's always ways that I want to try and challenge myself and not get too comfortable in the same position, because I feel like if you get too comfortable, you're going to stagnate. You're not going to progress. I'm not going to develop new skills. I'm not going to see, okay, what potential do I have over there? For example, of course, most of my whole life has been tennis. I'd like to explore other sports as well at some point in time, and other areas of sport. But even being in the role I am now, working in the integrity side of sport, when I sort of joined this team, it was a new team. It was an area of tennis I had pretty much no knowledge of. So it was quite humbling for me, for someone who knows a lot about the game and has seen a lot of things and done a lot of things, to say, actually, I could do A over here, which is, on paper, this is me through and through. It'd be fantastic. I'd enjoy it. Or I put myself out there, I challenge myself, I learn some new things. Yeah, okay, it might be tough, it might be hard, but I'm going to learn a lot. Who knows what opportunities it might present? And yeah, hopefully you get to a stage where you can look back and be like, actually, that was really good, kind of jumping over there and dipping my toe over there and seeing what would come of it.
I'm going to ask you then, Jodie, as well, because I think it's probably fair to say one of the things that you would have, if you'd said to me before we did our first community talk, what's the thing that you want to do the least of, it was been public speaking. Mm-hmm. So what still convinced you, even though every bone in your body probably was saying don't, that you still, what was the mechanism that still got you through to go, I'm actually still going to do it regardless of everything that I'm feeling?
I mean, that's still the case now, even though I've done this for a few episodes. I really struggle, I think, with speaking. And it's probably because I speak quite quickly anyway, so I really need a conscious effort to speak slowly, which I think I'm doing an okay job at the moment. But the reason why I wanted to do it is ultimately I just wanted to give something back, and I wanted to help something back, give something back. And I think that actually was more important to me to be able to do that than it was for me not to speak about it, because I know that I think my journey or how I've gone to the area needs to be heard, but I think it was a good opportunity and good experience to show the ways that I did get into it, the things that I did do. And yeah, they might not work for everyone, but they might work for one person. If it works for one person, great, that's fantastic. And for me, that was the overriding thing that I just told myself, that no, actually, no matter how scared you are of doing this, actually, once you do it, I think in my head, I'm thinking, you'll probably really enjoy it. I mean, I've never listened to any podcast or recording back. I don't like to listen to my own voice, so I can't bring myself to necessarily do that. But I think hopefully between us, with the different levels of experience, and our guests that are on the recording as well, I thought more people would get more out of that than if I said no and not to do it. So for me, that was the biggest thing, was just to say yes and let's just see what happens, rather than saying no and that's an opportunity lost. And just to keep going, keep saying yes, because you never know who you might meet. I mean, off the back of these community chats, I've had plenty of people, or a few people, reach out, had calls with them, people listening to the podcast saying, and Rich, in fact, had listened to the podcast. I didn't even know that he listened to it, and said, really enjoyed that chat with you and Dan. We were chatting about it. I can't remember necessarily what it was, but one of them thought that's really amazing that people are genuinely listening to it. B, they find it really helpful. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to keep going with it. But I was really nervous prior to the first one, and you knew that. But I still said yes and stuff, and I'm glad I did.
It's also an opportunity to better yourself, whether that's in your personal life or your professional life. You never know what you might get out of it. It might not benefit your day-to-day working life or the studies or whatever it might be that you're doing every day. But it might be something that you take a risk on, or you take a challenge, do something new that kind of benefits you in your personal life as well. Because I mean, believe it or not, I'm not the most natural public speaker. I've had to learn a lot of things, lots of tips and tricks and things like that. But that kind of helps with confidence outside of work as well, or people skills that I build on away from work. Helps when I'm talking to some pretty famous people at times. Not to brag, but just it really helps kind of being able to deliver on that professionalism that you have. And one thing I try and do, I don't know if it'd be useful for other people, is that for the last few years, sort of outside of work, I always try and do every year something new that I've never done before. Be that, you know, when I was in Spain, I played Gaelic football. You know, all of my friends in England were like, "What is Gaelic football? Why are you playing in like an Irish game?" And I was like, "Well, actually, you know, someone said, oh, you know, you might try. I've never heard of it, never seen what it looked like, but I ended up having, you know, being involved in it for a few years. I really enjoyed it, and that was just from being like, what the hell? Let's see what happens, or just doing different things that I might not necessarily do. It's a way to develop yourself and keep things interesting. And I find trying something new and challenging yourself, you never know, as you say, what opportunities might be there.
I also think adults especially don't like looking silly at something that they are just starting to do for the first time. I think it's almost like when you're in your childlike state, when you're a kid, you're constantly doing new things, and you're getting joy from doing it for the first time, as like the novelty of it. And I think the novelty and the childishness in a positive way almost gets beaten out of us as we get older, because we're more worried about looking bad, or our own insecurity or whatever else it might be, that other people are like, why on earth are you doing that? You're so rubbish at it. It was the story in the Built Invisible book that we've been talking about, that hopefully will come out sooner rather than later. And there was, I went to, without spoiling the book, it's not really, it's just one little story. I went to an ice rink with my two kids, and they were skating. I'm a terrible skater, by the way, so I was actually just literally doing the thing I'm telling everyone not to do, which is not doing it because I fall and literally crack my head open. But the fascinating thing was, there was this person on the ice, this man in his 40s or 50s, that was actually quite good, but obviously like an intermediate skater. But what he was doing is, he wasn't just practicing his safe moves all the time. He was practicing really difficult moves. You could see like his ability to actually try and execute a difficult move. And he literally must have fallen over about 20 times in a row. But the 21st one, he got it. But the amazing thing was, and I think this is a certain mindset of person as well, for the first 20, I just couldn't stop watching him really, because he literally kept on falling over so many times doing the same thing. He literally didn't get up and look around to see who was looking at him. And I found that an amazing like mindset idea, which was, he wasn't comparing himself, he wasn't like ashamed, he wasn't embarrassed, he was like, I'm doing this till I can do it, actually. And that ability to keep failing, call it failing, iterate and iterate and iterate and practice until you get better, is exactly the same you were saying about, as like, it might be surprising to hear that I wasn't always an amazing public speaker, like you said, but you were doing that constant practice until you got better and better and felt good at how you articulate. The same way, Jodie, I'm sure with you with public speaking, the same way with this skater, and the same way with me writing, for example, for the books I've written. You know, when I'm 12 years old, or when I'm 25 years old, I wasn't a brilliant writer. I'm still not a brilliant writer. But what I mean is, I had no problem with practicing my writing to get better at it. And that's, I think, the thing that's really interesting generally, which is the practicing and not necessarily comparing yourself to others, but still doing it and continuing to do it nonetheless.
I think that's such a good point, though, in probably in any way, personal or professional life. When you ever start anything new, you're never going to be perfect at it, ever. But you start with the intention that you're going to get better. And that's the same in a job, in a sport, in anything. And talking of that skater that failed 20 times. I mean, I could literally use that in a job context, you know, having 20 rejections or however many training contracts, jobs, any kind of job. Like, oh, well, I've got to keep going. And you have various people telling you, why are you keeping going? Why are you doing this? Why don't you do something else? No, I'm sticking in this lane. This is what I want to do. But why are you not getting anywhere with it? Well, it might the next time. Yeah, but you might not. Okay, well, that's your opinion and your view, but let me just try again. Just keep going, and you keep going. And then you eventually get there on 21st time or 24th time or whatever else. And yeah, it might be door number one for one person, or the first attempt for one person, but it could be the 50th attempt for someone else. And I just think that's the most interesting part of it as well. Like, it's not straightforward. And it can be for some people, don't get me wrong, but it's not always for others. But whether it's your first attempt or your 21st attempt, it shouldn't matter.
and don't put too much pressure on yourself when things don't work out. It's very, I guess we're all quite the same in that if something doesn't work out, or if it's the 20th time that you fall down, it's very easy to start putting pressure on yourself and, oh, why can't I do this so soon? Why is it taking so long? Or as you said, Dan, you start looking and comparing everyone else, what they do, and they looking at me. But just kind of focus on yourself and believe in yourself. I won't say the cheesy believe in the process, but like believe in yourself, believe in that, okay, might not have the ability or the knowledge or the skills now, but I'm gonna have the determination to keep working at this thing, wherever it is, at home, at work, and just keep kind of believing what you're trying to achieve at the end of the road.
And that leads me nicely onto a quote that Richard's favourite quote, and I equally love it. No, I'm not. I've got it written down, so I'm not going to mess up. And it is, if it is to be, it's up to me. And I just think that's such a powerful quote in itself, that anything you kind of want in life or want to do in life, if it's going to happen, it's ultimately up to you.
Yeah, and I think so that where that came from, that was something I was told by like a family friend when I was really, really little, too young to understand what that really meant. And then going through school, like I've always been one of those people that's like a really hard worker, but going through exams and stuff, my exam results never reflected like the amount of effort I put in. And that really bugged me. You know, that person in the class who's like revises the night before and they smash it. I was always the opposite. I hated those people. So I get really envious of them and be like, well, what is it? Why?
What's the secret sauce?
Yeah, exactly. It's an issue because of this, or it's an issue because of the teacher, or it's because I didn't have access to that book, or whatever it is. And my A-level results were really disappointing for what I should have got. I actually didn't get into any of my universities. I actually got in through clearing to my university, and the clearing process, for those that don't know, it's kind of just like the courses and the universities that are left that just have spaces, and you see what's available, and you kind of apply and hope that they're like, yeah, go on, we'll take you. So going through the clearing process was really hard. It's a lot of feels really rejecting, like what's wrong with me, why am I not good enough, blah blah blah. And again, going through the clearing process, I couldn't do the courses that I wanted to do. I wanted to do physiotherapy. That was always my dream, to work as a physiotherapist in performance sport, or in sort of public health. That was always what I was aiming for. But then all of a sudden I found myself at a university I'd never heard of before, Bedfordshire, which at the time was really low down in the league rankings, in a town, sorry Bedford, but I'd never heard of Bedford before in my life. But a month later I was living there and doing a course, sport and exercise science that I had an interest in, but I didn't want to be a sports scientist or work as a sports science practitioner. So all of those things where, again, I had to do something out of my comfort zone, never done before, take a risk. I could have very easily kind of thought, nah, I'm going to sack uni off, I'm going to do this, I'm going to work in the truck, whatever. But I thought, okay, let me try at this. And I just got to a stage where, particularly that time, and maybe like first, second year of uni, where it was very much blaming everything else and everyone else for why I wasn't where I wanted to be, or getting results I wanted, or doing this or that. And it just got to a stage where I can't put it back to one particular moment or anything, but with some really good chats with my family and guidance and everything, just realizing actually I need to take some of this onus on myself. I need to, of course, people can help me and they can give me advice, but they can't do the work for me. They can't study for me. They can't put in the extra hours going to conferences for me on my behalf. I need to do that. So I need to kind of stop with the excuses and just get on with it. And that is kind of linked to something from a drumming podcast. I'm a drummer as well, and it's a really good podcast I listen to, and a lot of what they kind of talk about is no excuses mindset. I'm sure it's pretty common across different industries, but that also links to that quote where I'm very much like, you know what, I'm going to take away the excuses out of this. I'm not just going to sit and wallow and blame everything else. I'm going to, yes, there are barriers in various aspects of life and society and everything, but to the best of my ability, I'm going to put this down to me and be a responsible one to work harder to get to where I want to be.
Love that. I mean, that isn't a good 5-minute monologue.
Sorry for going on.
Brilliant. What you just said reminded me of a book I've just finished. I think I needed to read it at the time that I read it. It's called The Obstacle is the Way by a writer called Ryan Holiday. And he's explaining that actually it's through, always makes sense, but you've got to sometimes read it and hear it at the right time. You need to hear it really. That it's actually through the difficult times and the difficult moments do you realise actually that thing that you need to do is still right in front of you anyway. Or almost like the idea is that the path through is the path through the obstacle, because that's the learning, that's the difficulty, that's the stuff that makes you realize when the next obstacle or the next problem or the next thing comes along in various different ways, that it's not necessarily just going to defeat you. And the obstacle being the way is basically explaining there's loads of obstacles, there's loads of things that will challenge, but actually they are the best type of learning experiences within reason for you then to be able to become more resilient, for you to be able to practice the idea of finding ways to be able to still achieve regardless of what are the uncontrollables in life. There's trying to remember the name of another book without turning this into a book club. It'll come back to me in just a second. But it's a book from a Holocaust survivor, and he was in 3 different concentration camps in Nazi Germany, and he basically explained that in the end, the only thing that he could control was his mindset. He couldn't control if he was going to live or if he was going to die, if he was going to do 10 hours in the snow working on some railway construction track, or bury his friends basically. But what he could control was his mindset to try and survive or decide on his emotional response to what was going on. And it was just a fascinating idea of, in a very extreme situation, of the difference between what we can control and what we can't control. And I always feel that when I read that for the 4th time, actually, because I was trying to just let it seep in, actually, which I really enjoyed, the perspective is that exactly that was one of the strands, which is there is so much that we can't control. Absolutely, we can't control anyone else's responses to anything. But what we can absolutely own is how we respond to particular things. And it might not feel great sometimes, but what we otherwise going to do.
Yeah, I love the word resilience. That's that sort of, yeah. Just love that, and it's such a key. Would you call it skill? Would you say?
I really think it is.
Yeah,
Well, something that I think people need to understand. It's not something that you have or you don't have. It's a thing that you can practice to get better at.
Yeah.
And I always was like, I'm really envious of those people that can just get over things or deal with stuff easily or the rest of it. And I think generally that's not necessarily the case. I think if you want to be good at something, you have to practice it.
Yeah.
But that type of thing is very difficult and intangible and invisible to practice. How do you practice resilience?
Yeah.
Well, you practice resilience by when stuff happens,
Yeah.
working out how best to react to the stuff.
I think it's only when these things do happen and you make steps into, get through the obstacle, get over the obstacle. It's only when you look back and you realise what you've done, then you can use that as going forward. But I think at the times when things happen, you've got your reaction to rejection or whatever else, and you do things to move on from it. But it's never an immediate thought. It's always afterwards. You think, I did that, that's a good thing, or I could do this better the next time, or keep going, or all those different kind of things. But yeah, it's all like reflection as well. I think when you look back at an event, you think, and then look where you are or where you get to. It's all part of the stepping stone.
I think it's such a key skill, as you say, that can be practiced and can be worked on. And I think I've been out with the school education system for a long time now, but I'd love to think that it's something that young people are taught, and not just necessarily young people, even adults. We need to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
We all can get better at our resilience. It's such an important thing to have. I think when it comes to like August every year and A-level results day, people kind of take mick out Jeremy Clarkson because he always puts a tweet out about, don't forget I got a U in my A-levels and I'm here and I've got this, that and the other. But yes, you can have a laugh and a joke here, but it's so true what he's saying, and a few people sort of do that, and it's kind of what I say to some students from my old uni I spoke to, like, I had no business being at this uni or going to my results, I had no business doing that. I came out sort of with a degree and a master's degree. I never thought I'd have either of those, but it's because it got to the stage where come coming into, like, I know I said I didn't know where I kind of thought, actually, I need to just put things down to me. But it was actually from playing lots of tennis at university and competing and lots of coaching. I was realising in my coaching sessions, you teach the players, more from coaching football or other sports, you teach the players exactly as you said, control the controllables. You can blame dodgy balls, you can blame the weather, the net, the court, your shoes, you can blame all that, but you've got to really think about what you can control. Think about that, particularly in an individual sport. Just those sorts of lessons I learned from the court and then taking that outside was really powerful for me and sort of really helped me think of it as a skill that needs to be worked on.
Yeah, I think very briefly, and Josie, I think maybe got one more last question for Rich. No pressure. Yeah, it was something one of my friends said to me when I was doing the Build Invisible book, which was, he said to me, failure wasn't such a big thing because I'd already done it. And I really, really liked that idea, which is almost like, you know, some people will plain sail through life just because of lots of different reasons, but at some point you're going to hit a pretty difficult, small, big, or otherwise roadblock. And actually, a lot of the people I'd spoken to had actually had a lot of those types of things, issues, failures, problems, a bit earlier on. And as a result, they haven't catastrophized the problem in a way because they had hit those roadblocks, had developed mechanisms, good, bad, or indifferent, to be able to deal with them, realized it wasn't as bad as they maybe thought it was, and then got on with stuff and continued. And so the idea, exactly as you said, which is, and it sounds similar with your exams with A-levels and such, which is almost like, looking back, it's obviously easier than being at the time where it feels ridiculously uncomfortable and it's the end of the world. But effectively knowing that you got through it and that it wasn't the end of the world, even though it felt it at the time, I think stands people in very good stead for then the issues and stuff that then develops when you get older, that then interrupt life, basically, which I think holds you, as I said, holds you in good stead.
Yeah, I think that's just fascinating in itself. I think on that point, like I just said, nothing's ever as bad as it seems once it's happened, but at the absolute time, it's the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And I put you on the spot for a last question. I don't really know what I'm going to ask. I guess it probably would be for those that are listening, whether it be in your role in sport advice, but what, I guess, maybe advice would you give to others, or top tips would you give to others, and not even to get into the sports sector, but just to get into any field that they want to get into, or anything like that. What would be your kind of top 3 things?
It's a strong final question.
Go for it.
I'd say my 2 biggest things that have, again, everything I've said today is from my experience. Everyone is different. What I've said might not work for them, but what's worked for me, and I would be happy to share with people, is it really pays in many different ways to just be a nice person and to, as I said, leave a good impression and be someone that is willing to build relationships, to listen to others, to give back, to share, to help others when they come to you. For me, that's something that has really, really helped me, particularly in my professional life and my personal life as well. Like, it just being a good person and someone who's willing to build relationships. I'm trying not to use the word networking, as you say.
No,
I don't do networking here.
Not bad word.
But build relationships, work on them with people, particularly in your professional life. And then the other thing I would say, again, stealing something from a podcast I listen to, is to point your compass towards joy. And for me, that's really powerful. I regularly think about that. As I said, I'm fortunate to be in a position where I work in sport that I enjoy, and I have pursuits and hobbies that I enjoy, and that's because I think, right, okay, what's really going to give me the most meaning out of life? What am I really going to push myself that 110% for? And that's because I'm aiming for something that I really think will give me joy. I'll be happy waking up and doing every day.
And what a note to end on.
Lovely.
Positive note. Well, thanks for coming on, Rich. Really enjoyed that kind of hour of discussion. It's really interesting to hear about that background and tips going forward. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
And looking forward to the next session, which we'll tell everyone about in due course.
Yeah, hopeful for one next month.
Sure.
So we'll keep everyone posted on LinkedIn, and don't forget to join the DG community. group on LinkedIn as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.